I have the authority to seize your house for HOA violations. That's what this insane woman screamed while storming onto our property with a clipboard and fake badge, acting like she owned our entire mountain. This complete lunatic actually believed she could steal our home through bogus HOA fees, but she picked the absolute wrong family to terrorize. While this crazy woman was screaming threats and waving papers around, my brilliant wife Amara stayed ice cold and pulled out something that instantly turned this woman's world completely upside down. The second Rebecca saw what was in Amara's hand, she went from raging lunatic to terrified statue. BD Stories. Viewers, tell me where you're watching from, because this confrontation gets absolutely insane. My name's Tyler, and I've got to tell you about the most insane morning of my entire life. Picture this. My wife Amara and I are living our dream in this gorgeous log cabin up in the mountains, 3 acres of pure paradise. We thought we'd found peace, you know. We paid cash for this place, followed every rule, and minded our own business. But apparently, just existing while black was enough to put us on someone's hit list. See, our neighborhood used to have an HOA about 5 years before we moved in, but it got dissolved because nobody wanted to deal with the drama anymore. Smart move, right? Wrong. Because apparently nobody told Rebecca that her reign of terror was officially over. This woman, and I'm using that term loosely here, had been harassing us for 3 solid months. We're talking fake violation notices about our grass being too tall, threats about our house color being inappropriate for the community, and my personal favorite demands that we comply with community standards. The audacity was absolutely mind-blowing. But here's what Rebecca didn't know, and this is where my wife Amara is just brilliant. She'd been doing her homework. While Rebecca was busy playing pretend HOA queen, Amara was on those community forums digging deep, asking the right questions. And wouldn't you know it, she discovered that our self-appointed neighborhood dictator had an outstanding arrest warrant from Madison County. Can you imagine? This woman was walking around threatening other people while she was literally a fugitive. Amara called the police a full week before the showdown, gave them all the details, and basically set the most beautiful trap you've ever seen. So, there we were that Saturday morning, just enjoying our coffee, when I heard gravel crunching in our driveway. I look out the window and see Rebecca's rusty SUV pulling up with some poor neighbor she'd somehow convinced to be her enforcement officer. This woman steps out like she's conducting a military operation, clipboard in hand, fake authority badge pinned to her jacket, acting like she owns the entire mountain. She marches up to our porch and announces, "I'm here to conduct mandatory violation inspections according to community rules." The sheer nerve of this woman still amazes me. Now, here's where Amara shows just how smart she really is. Instead of immediately shutting Rebecca down like we'd done before, my wife puts on this worried expression and says, We could discuss this, couldn't we? We're still learning all the rules." I'm watching this unfold, and I can see Rebecca's eyes just light up with victory. She actually thought she was finally going to break us. Rebecca steps right onto our property, and this is important because she's now officially trespassing, and starts talking about how people like you need to understand there are community standards here. The racism was so blatant it made my skin crawl, but Amara just kept playing her part perfectly. For the next 20 minutes, I watched Rebecca live out her absolute power fantasy. She walked around our yard taking pictures, measuring things that didn't need measuring, writing up fake violations left and right. She handed Amara a bill for $800 for landscape regulation violations. Complete nonsense, of course, but she was so proud of herself. The neighbor she'd brought along, this sweet older lady, kept whispering, "Rebecca, are you sure about this?" But Rebecca just waved her off, saying she'd been doing this for 10 years and knew exactly what she was doing. The confidence radiating off this woman was absolutely unreal. Then came the moment that changed everything. Rebecca turns around, walking back toward her car with that clipboard clutched like a trophy, probably already planning how she was going to spend our money. But Amara steps forward, and I swear the entire atmosphere shifted. Gone was the worried, confused homeowner act. The woman standing on our porch now had ice in her veins and steel in her voice. She pulls out this folded paper from her back pocket and says in the calmest tone you've ever heard, "You might want to take a look at this before you leave. I believe the Madison County Sheriff's Department has been looking for you." The look on Rebecca's face, Man, I wish I had that moment on video. She went from smug queen bee to deer in headlights in about 2 seconds flat. She's stammering, What is that? This is ridiculous. You're setting me up. The neighbor. Rebecca had brought along practically shouted, Rebecca, you told me you had real authority. But before Rebecca can even process what's happening, we hear the sound that made this whole thing perfect. Police sirens coming up our mountain road. 2 patrol cars pull into our driveway, and Amara walks over to the first officer like she's been expecting him all along. She hands him the arrest warrant printout and says, I think this woman has an appointment with you from about 6 months ago. And the officer looks at the paperwork, looks at Rebecca, and nods. Ma'am, we need to have a conversation. You have an outstanding warrant from Madison County. And that's when Rebecca completely lost it. She starts screaming about how we set her up, how this is all fake, how she's a respected member of the community. But the officers aren't buying any of it. As they're reading Rebecca, her rights, she's still trying to maintain that fake authority. I am a respected community member. I've been protecting property values here for years. But then one of the officers starts looking through her bag and finds something that made all of us realize this was way bigger than we thought. He pulls out 23 pre-printed violation notices, all blank and ready to be filled out. Then comes a fake seal that says Mountain View HOA, which doesn't exist. And finally, a list of 15 addresses with something called a target list and weird symbols next to certain names. The officer looks at us and says, Folks, this looks like a systematic operation. That's when Amara mentions that Rebecca might have been running the same scam over in Oak Ridge, and suddenly the officers are very interested. They start making phone calls, taking photos of everything, treating this like the serious crime it apparently was. Meanwhile, Rebecca is being loaded into the patrol car, still screaming at Amara. You don't know what you've just done. I have things about you that you can't even imagine. And then right before they drive away, I hear her on the phone with someone saying, Marcus, they know you need to get over there and clean everything up before... The phone call got cut off, but we all heard the name Marcus. The officers heard it too, and they started asking us if we knew who that was. I told them about this gray Honda Civic that I'd seen parked near Rebecca's house every Sunday for months. I always thought it was a relative or something, but now everything was starting to make sense. This wasn't just one crazy woman with a power complex. This was organized. As we watched the police cars disappear down our mountain road, Amara turned to me and said, I think we just opened a much bigger can of worms than we realized. What were these things Rebecca claimed to have prepared to destroy Amara? And why was she so confident that getting arrested was just the beginning? Drop your theory in the comments. What do you think Rebecca was hiding that was even worse than an arrest warrant? 2 days later, Rebecca made bail, and let me tell you, that woman came back with a vengeance. But this time she wasn't flying solo. She had backup. A guy named Marcus Cooper, about 45 years old, a former accountant who'd lost his license for some shady dealings. Now I knew who owned that gray Honda Civic I'd been seeing every Sunday. The pieces were starting to come together, and none of it looked good for us. Within hours of Rebecca getting out, Amara started receiving anonymous letters under our door. Not just any letters. These were professionally typed accusations about us running illegal businesses, disturbing the peace. Even claims that we were somehow connected to drug activity. Can you imagine the audacity? This woman gets arrested for fraud, and her immediate response is to double down with even more fraud. But here's the thing about my wife. She doesn't get scared, she gets strategic. While Rebecca was plotting her revenge, Amara was already 3 steps ahead. The first sign that we were dealing with something much bigger came in an envelope with no return address. Inside was a handwritten note that said, Rebecca did the same thing in Oak Ridge. The Santos family had to move because they couldn't take it anymore. Check into something called Mountain Valley Community Board. It's all fake, too. A concerned friend. That's when we realized Rebecca hadn't just been playing pretend HOA queen in our neighborhood. She'd been running this con for years, moving from community to community, targeting families and destroying lives. Amara spent the next day doing what she does best, investigating. She discovered that Rebecca had created an entire fake empire of community organizations. There was Mountain View HOA for our area, Oak Ridge HOA for her previous hunting ground, complete with professional-looking emails, fake letterhead, and even websites that looked legitimate if you didn't dig too deep. The level of organization was honestly impressive in the most terrifying way possible. This wasn't some neighborhood busybody having a power trip. This was systematic fraud on a massive scale. But Rebecca and Marcus weren't done with us, not even close. What happened next still makes my blood boil when I think about it. They launched what I can only describe as a coordinated psychological warfare campaign designed to drive us out of our own home. First came the email bombing. Rebecca and Marcus sent urgent violation notices from a fake email address to 18 of our neighbors claiming we were running illegal businesses because customer cars sometimes parked in our driveway when I did repair work. They accused us of noise violations for playing Latin music too loudly, and even suggested our house color was somehow destroying property values in the neighborhood. Then they escalated to government harassment. These people filed false reports with the building department, claiming we'd constructed our deck without permits, which was complete nonsense, because we had all our paperwork. They reported us to the tax office for unreported rental income, suggesting we were running some kind of illegal boarding house. Every single claim was fabricated, but each one triggered an investigation that we had to deal with. Do you know how exhausting it is to constantly prove your innocence when you've done absolutely nothing wrong? The worst part was the social media campaign they launched against us. Rebecca started spreading rumors in local community groups online that Amara had serious legal problems from her previous state and that we were under FBI investigation. Completely made up, but you know how these things work. Once the rumors start spreading, people start treating you differently. I watched our neighbors who used to wave cheerfully suddenly avoid eye contact when we passed on the street. The grocery store clerk started giving us weird looks. It was like watching our entire community slowly turn against us based on lies. By Wednesday of that week, the pressure was really getting to Amara. I found her sitting in our kitchen that evening, hands shaking slightly as she held her coffee cup. "Tyler," she said, "am I doing the right thing? Maybe we should just move away like the Santos family did." Hearing my strong, brilliant wife even consider giving up broke my heart. But I reminded her about that target list the police had found in Rebecca's bag. "Honey," I told her, "you weren't the first person Rebecca targeted, and if we don't stop her, you won't be the last." That conversation was exactly what Amara needed to get her fight back. The next day, she started reaching out to other victims. Through that anonymous letter, she managed to connect with Maria Santos over social media. The video call we had with Maria was absolutely heartbreaking. This woman told us how Rebecca and Marcus had done exactly the same thing to her family. Fake emails, false government reports, spreading rumors about them being illegal immigrants and drug dealers. And Maria's husband lost his job because the background check companies picked up all the false reports Rebecca had filed. They'd paid Rebecca $1,400 total before finally giving up and moving away. But Maria also gave us something incredibly valuable: validation that we weren't crazy, and more importantly, evidence that this was an established pattern. Amara started documenting everything Rebecca and Marcus were doing to us. Every harassing phone call got recorded, every fake email got screenshotted, every false report got tracked. She created files that showed the systematic nature of their harassment campaign. My wife was building a case that would make any prosecutor's mouth water. Then we got our first real ally in this fight. An elderly neighbor named Mrs. Cooper, who'd lived in our area for 15 years, showed up at our door with a manila envelope. "Honey," she said to Amara, "I know what Rebecca's been doing. I've been keeping documents from 3 years ago when she started trying to collect fees from me. Inside that envelope was a gold mine, fake HOA notices from 2021, a copy of a $600 check Mrs. Cooper had written for something called annual community maintenance fee, and photos of Rebecca measuring Mrs. Cooper's yard without permission. Mrs. Cooper told us she'd paid the money because she was scared of confrontation, but watching Amara stand up to Rebecca had inspired her to finally speak out. What Mrs. Cooper revealed next absolutely floored us. She pulled out a thick folder from her bag and spread the contents across our kitchen table. "I've been documenting everything for 3 years," she said quietly. Inside were photographs of Rebecca trespassing on various properties, copies of fake violation notices with different letterheads, and most damning of all, a handwritten list in Rebecca's own writing titled Neighborhood Improvement Priority Actions. The list was chilling in its clinical approach. It ranked every house by address with notes like monitor for compliance, escalate pressure, and Success. Relocated. Mrs. Cooper pointed to several crossed-out addresses. These were all families who moved away, she explained. I watched Rebecca check them off her list like items on a grocery list. There were notes about lawn maintenance schedules, car counting, and even observations about cooking smells and music preferences. But what really got to me were Rebecca's personal comments scattered throughout the margins. Things like, finally, next to crossed-out addresses, and stubborn, needs more pressure next to others. She'd been treating our entire neighborhood like some kind of social engineering experiment, and Mrs. Cooper had been quietly building a case file the whole time. I knew someday someone would need this evidence, she said. I just never imagined I'd be brave enough to use it. I've seen Rebecca target every family in this neighborhood that wasn't white, she said. She told me it was necessary to preserve community character. But in the 2 years since you moved in, we've had zero crime, and my property value has increased 15%. Having Mrs. Cooper as a witness was huge because she could testify to Rebecca's pattern of targeting minority families specifically. As we were putting together our evidence, Amara learned something that chilled us both to the bone. When Rebecca was first arrested, Marcus had apparently broken into her house trying to retrieve something important. The police knew about it, but hadn't caught him. What was so important that Marcus would risk a breaking and entering charge to get it? That question kept us both up at night, because we had a feeling whatever Marcus was trying to hide was going to make Rebecca's fake HOA scam look like child's play. By the end of that week, we were getting anonymous text messages with threats like, "You think you've won? We have 4 years of data on you and every move you've made. Tomorrow there's going to be a surprise you can't handle." Tyler found tire tracks near our mailbox that didn't belong to any of our neighbors' cars and cigarette butts that suggested someone had been watching our house. The surveillance was real, and it was escalating. But instead of scaring Amara, all of this just made her more determined. "They think threatening us will make me back down," she told me. "But now, I know this isn't just about us. This is about stopping them before they destroy another family." That night at 11 p.m., our phone rang. Amara answered, and we heard Rebecca's voice on the other end. "Tomorrow you'll understand what happens when you mess with the wrong people. And this time, no warrant is going to save you." What kind of plan had Rebecca and Marcus been cooking up for 48 hours? And was Amara really prepared for whatever twisted revenge scheme Rebecca was about to unleash? BD Stories community, comment your predictions. What underhanded trick will Rebecca try next? The answer is going to shock you more than you think. The next morning, Amara did something that absolutely blew my mind. Instead of waiting for Rebecca's next attack, my brilliant wife picked up the phone and called Rebecca herself. "You win," Amara said, putting on this defeated voice that I almost believed myself. "We can't take any more of this. We want to settle this outside of court." I'm watching Amara work this psychological chess game, and I've got to say, Rebecca took the bait completely. "Finally," Rebecca practically shouted into the phone, "I told you from the beginning that cooperation would be better for everyone. We can meet at the prosecutor's office to do the paperwork." What Rebecca didn't know was that Amara had already coordinated with the prosecutor to record their meeting. She'd prepared all our evidence, organized every piece of documentation we'd gathered, and even arranged for Maria Santos to fly in from Oak Ridge as a surprise witness. My wife was setting up the most beautiful legal trap I'd ever seen, and Rebecca was walking straight into it with a smile on her face. When Rebecca and Marcus showed up at the prosecutor's office, they looked like some kind of professional legal team. Briefcases, documents, the whole 9 yards. They genuinely thought they were about to intimidate us into paying them thousands of dollars and disappearing quietly. Marcus introduced himself as Rebecca's financial advisor and said they'd prepared a very reasonable settlement package. The arrogance radiating off these two was absolutely incredible. Then Rebecca opened her briefcase, and I swear she thought she was about to deliver the killing blow. She pulled out what she claimed were evidence photos of Amara trespassing, which were actually just pictures of my wife standing on our own property line. She had witness statements from neighbors which she'd obviously written herself because they all used the same handwriting. And get this, she had financial records showing that Amara owed $12,000 in back dues to their fake HOA. The creativity was almost admirable if it wasn't so completely criminal. But Rebecca wasn't done. She looked straight at Amara and said, "If you don't accept this offer, we're filing a federal lawsuit for harassment and defamation. Plus, I've gathered evidence about certain irregularities in your background." Then Marcus chimed in with what was probably the most disgusting part of their whole routine. "We also have contacts with immigration services. They're very interested in cases involving fraudulent documentation. They were literally threatening to sic immigration authorities on my wife because they assumed she was an immigrant. The racism wasn't even subtle anymore. It was right there in the open." This is where Amara showed exactly why Rebecca picked the wrong person to mess with. She looked at me with these worried eyes and said, "Tyler, maybe we should just accept their offer." For a moment even I thought she might actually be considering giving in. Rebecca's face lit up with pure triumph. "I knew you'd see reason," she said. "Smart people don't fight battles they can't win." Marcus started pushing for an immediate decision, saying the offer would expire that day. Then Amara did something that still gives me chills when I think about it. She sat in complete silence for 30 seconds, just staring at her hands while Rebecca and Marcus exchanged these victorious looks. Finally, she looked up and said, "I have one question before I sign anything. Rebecca, are you a licensed HOA manager?" Rebecca immediately started into this practice speech about her 10 years of experience and credentials, but Amara cut her off. "That's not what I asked. I asked if you have a license." What happened next was absolutely beautiful. Amara opened her laptop, connected it to the room's projector, and started destroying Rebecca's entire world, one slide at a time. First slide, Mountain View Community Oversight does not exist in state registry. Second slide, Oak Ridge Residential Board dissolved in 2019. Third slide, email headers showing that Rebecca and Marcus had created 47 fake communications over the past 4 years. The look on Rebecca's face was transitioning from confusion to panic to pure terror, but Amara wasn't finished. "And here's Maria Santos," she said as Maria appeared on the video call screen. "Hello, Rebecca. Long time no see." I watched all the color drain out of Rebecca's face as she realized she'd been completely outmaneuvered. Marcus tried to stand up, probably thinking they could just leave, but Amara calmly told him to sit down because they weren't done yet. Maria told her story through the video call, explaining how Rebecca and Marcus had collected $1,400 from her family through fake HOA fees. When her family refused to pay more, Rebecca and Marcus spread rumors that they were illegal immigrants and drug dealers. They had filed false reports with immigration authorities, claiming Maria's family had forged documents. Maria's husband lost his job because background check companies picked up all these false reports, and eventually the family had no choice but to move away. Rebecca tried to deny everything, saying it was completely different, but Maria wasn't having it. She described the exact same pattern: fake emails, false government reports, social media harassment campaigns. They had it down to a science, Maria said. The same tricks, the same threats, the same whisper campaigns designed to force families out of their communities. That's when the prosecutor entered the room with a USB drive that changed everything. "Thank you, Ms. Amara, for helping us collect this evidence," he said. "This drive contains 4 years of communications between Rebecca and Marcus, including detailed plans to target specific demographics in rural communities." Marcus immediately tried to throw Rebecca under the bus, claiming he only did accounting and didn't know about the discrimination aspects. But the prosecutor wasn't buying Marcus's innocent act for a second. Under pressure, Marcus started revealing details about operations in other communities that made everyone realize this was even bigger than we'd imagined. He told us about Cedar Falls, where they'd successfully forced out 3 Latino families by filing fake building code violations and spreading rumors about property value destruction. In Pine Ridge, they'd targeted an African-American veteran and his family with constant noise complaints and fake HOA violations until the stress caused the man to have a heart attack. The family moved away while he was still recovering in the hospital. Marcus's voice was shaking as he described Rebecca's methods. She had it down to a science. Research, the community demographics identify the newest minority families, create fake violations tailored to racial stereotypes, then escalate until they either pay up or move away. She called it community preservation through natural attrition. The clinical way she talked about destroying people's lives, it was like she was discussing pest control. Rebecca completely lost control at that point. She started screaming, "You people don't understand. I was protecting these communities. People like her are changing everything." The mask was completely off now. There was no more pretending this was about property values or community standards. This was pure, unadulterated racism, and she was saying it right there in front of the prosecutor and video cameras. Amara looked at Rebecca with this incredibly calm expression and said, "Change what, Rebecca? Make neighborhoods less racist. Make communities more welcoming." Yeah, I'm guilty of that. That's when the police officers came in to arrest both Rebecca and Marcus. Marcus went quietly, probably already thinking about his plea deal, but Rebecca was still screaming as they led her away. She's going to destroy property values. She's going to bring more of them. Even in handcuffs, she couldn't stop herself from revealing exactly who she really was. As they were taking Rebecca out of the room, Amara delivered what might be the most perfect closing line I've ever heard. "Rebecca, I bought this house with cash. I pay my taxes in full. I contribute to my community. The only thing destroying property values around here is your hatred." Rebecca tried to respond, but the officers were already walking her toward the door. Just as she was about to be led away completely, Rebecca turned around and screamed something that made everyone in the room realize this case was about to get much bigger. "That USB doesn't have everything. There's something else you haven't found. Marcus knows where it is." The prosecutor immediately started asking Marcus about this second USB, and you could see the panic in Marcus's eyes as he realized Rebecca had just implicated them both in something even worse. What kind of secrets were hidden in this second USB that Rebecca was willing to risk everything to keep hidden? And why did Marcus know about it when he claimed he was just doing accounting? Comment your theories. What could be in that second USB that made Rebecca panic so badly? Prepare for a revelation that changes everything. Under intense pressure in that interrogation room, Marcus made a decision that would blow this case wide open. "I'll tell you everything," he said to the prosecutor, "but I want a deal." What came out of his mouth over the next hour was so much worse than anything we'd imagined. "At first I thought Rebecca just wanted money," Marcus explained, "but then I realized she had a personal agenda. She was tracking families by race and ethnicity. And the systematic nature of what they had been doing was absolutely mind-blowing." Marcus told us about this second USB that Rebecca kept in a bank vault, something she called her community preservation project. When the prosecutor asked what that meant, Marcus got this haunted look in his eyes. "Last year when we were targeting the Santos family, I asked Rebecca why we weren't focusing on people who actually violated regulations. She told me, 'Marcus, this isn't about violations. This is about preserving the character of these communities.' That phrase, preserving the character, sent chills down my spine because I knew exactly what she meant by character. As Marcus kept talking, the picture of Rebecca's operation got clearer and more disturbing. She had spreadsheets tracking the diversity percentages of each neighborhood she targeted. She researched school districts to find what she called traditional families. She had maps with certain areas marked as target zones and others marked as safe zones. This wasn't random harassment. This was demographic engineering disguised as community management. Marcus described a conversation that happened months earlier where he'd asked Rebecca why they needed to continue the scam when they were already making good money. Her response still haunts me. "This isn't about money anymore, Marcus. This is about saving our way of life. When your accountant starts having second thoughts about your methods, you know you've crossed into seriously dark territory." With a warrant in hand, police raided Rebecca's bank vault, and what they found inside made everyone involved realize we were dealing with something far beyond simple fraud. The prosecutor invited Amara to witness the opening of the second USB since she'd been the key whistleblower in the case. What we saw on that computer screen was like looking into the mind of someone completely consumed by racial hatred. The USB contained something called the Community Demographics Project. 12 rural communities mapped out with color coding based on racial composition. There were target lists ranking families by what Rebecca called removal priority. She had before and after photos showing what she labeled successful demographic shifts. Basically before and after pictures of neighborhoods becoming whiter after her intervention. The level of planning and documentation was absolutely staggering, but the personal diary entries about Amara were what really got to me. Rebecca had written things like, "The black woman thinks she belongs in Mountain View. Need to make her understand this isn't her place." Another entry read, "These people need to stay in cities where they belong, not contaminate mountain communities." And perhaps most chilling, "Operation successful in Oak Ridge, Santos family relocated, property values preserved. She was treating human families like chess pieces to be moved around based on their skin color. When Amara read those diary entries, I watched my strong, confident wife break down for the first time since this whole nightmare started. "Tyler," she said through her tears, "I spent months wondering what I did wrong. I thought maybe I was too loud, too different, too much. Now I understand. I was wrong the moment I was born black." Watching the woman I love realize that she'd been hated for simply existing was one of the hardest moments of my entire life. The USB also revealed Rebecca's expansion plans, lists of 8 additional communities she planned to target, templates for creating fake organizations, and recruitment strategies for finding more people like Marcus in each area. She wasn't just running a local scam. She was building a network designed to systematically exclude minorities from rural communities across multiple states. The scope of her ambition was absolutely terrifying. Mrs. Cooper provided additional context that helped us understand how deep Rebecca's racism ran. "Rebecca told me these new people don't understand our values," Mrs. Cooper explained. "She said they were changing what made this place special." Mountain View had been an all-white community until the 1990s, and Rebecca apparently believed it should stay that way forever. What was most disturbing was the psychological profiling Rebecca had conducted on each of her targets. The USB contained detailed personality assessments she'd written about every minority family, noting things like likely to fight back, require sustained pressure, financially vulnerable, focus on expensive violations, and weak community connections, isolate through neighbor manipulation. She had identified Amara specifically as high-resistance target, intelligent and confrontational, requires maximum escalation protocol. Rebecca had actually planned a detailed 6-month psychological warfare campaign specifically designed to break our spirits and force us out. She'd seen other families that she'd successfully driven away. A Korean family in 2019 because of too many cars and weird smells. A Latino family in 2020 because they were too loud with too many guests. And an Indian family in 2021 whose property modifications weren't in community character. The financial records told an interesting story, too. Rebecca had made about $78,000 over 4 years, but she'd spent $45,000 on operational costs. Profit wasn't her main motivation. Control and racial purity were. She was willing to operate at a loss as long as she could keep certain types of families out of her communities. In a desperate final move, Rebecca had her lawyer call our house using publicly available contact information. The lawyer delivered what was obviously Rebecca's message: "My client wants to inform you that you've destroyed a peaceful community. Property values will plummet. Crime rates will increase." When Amara took the phone, her response was perfect. "Rebecca, I've lived here for 2 years. Crime rate 0. Property values up 12%. Community involvement, you organize blood drives and food banks. You want to talk about contributions?" Rebecca's lawyer tried to continue with more threats, but Amara wasn't having any of it. "Tell Rebecca," she said, "that I bought this house with cash. I pay my taxes in full, and I contribute to my community. The only thing destroying property values around here is hatred." Then she hung up the phone, and we both knew that Rebecca's last desperate attempt to intimidate us had failed completely. With evidence of systematic racial targeting spanning multiple years and communities, prosecutors filed both state and federal charges against Rebecca. She was now facing potential 15 to 20 years in prison for what had become a hate crime conspiracy case. Marcus, in exchange for his cooperation and testimony against Rebecca, was offered a reduced sentence and the chance to provide information about other communities they'd targeted. As we sat in our living room that night, processing everything we'd learned, Amara said something that really stuck with me. "Tyler, I'm not angry anymore. I'm sad. Sad that Rebecca wasted years of her life hating people she never tried to know. My wife's capacity for compassion, even towards someone who'd tried to destroy our lives, reminded me why I fell in love with her in the first place. But we both knew this wasn't over yet. The legal system would have to determine whether justice would truly be served and whether other families Rebecca had terrorized would finally get the closure they deserved. The question that kept me awake that night was whether justice alone would be enough to stop people like Rebecca, or if we needed something more to protect innocent families from this kind of systematic hatred. BD Stories. Family, comment, and share any similar stories you've witnessed. It might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Sometimes the most important thing we can do is let people know they're not alone in their fight against hatred. The federal courthouse was packed beyond capacity on the day of Rebecca's trial. Civil rights organizations, media outlets, and community members from 3 different states had come to witness what many were calling a landmark case in combating systematic racial harassment. Amara didn't want any of the celebrity that came with national attention. "I don't want fame from this," she told reporters. "I just want justice and closure for all the families that were hurt." But whether she wanted it or not, Rebecca's trial had become a symbol of fighting back against racial intimidation. Rebecca had hired a high-profile defense attorney from Seattle who immediately tried to frame the case as a misunderstanding and politically motivated prosecution. Watching this lawyer try to defend the indefensible was almost entertaining if it wasn't so serious. Rebecca sat straight in her chair throughout the opening statements, occasionally shaking her head like she was outraged by these false accusations. The woman still thought she could charm her way out of the mountain of evidence against her. When the prosecution laid out its case, it was absolutely devastating. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," the prosecutor began, "this case is about a woman who used fake authority to systematically target families based on race, forcing them from their homes through harassment and intimidation." The defense attorney tried to argue that Rebecca was just a concerned community member whose actions have been mischaracterized, claiming she was protecting property values and community standards, not targeting anyone based on race. But everyone in that courtroom knew better. When Amara took the witness stand, the entire room went silent. She was dressed professionally, spoke clearly and calmly, but you could feel the strength radiating from her with every word. "Your Honor," she began, "when I bought my home in Mountain View, I thought I was buying peace. I paid cash, I followed all the rules, and I tried to be a good neighbor. But to Rebecca, my only crime was being black in her community." Just hearing my wife describe the impact of Rebecca's harassment in such a composed way made me incredibly proud and heartbroken at the same time. The prosecution had Amara read some of Rebecca's diary entries out loud, and the effect on the jury was immediate. "This black woman needs to learn her place," Amara read. "People like her belong in urban areas, not mountain communities." Then came the most damning entry: "Operation Make Life Difficult Until They Leave." Amara's voice wavered slightly, but she didn't break. "These words hurt," she said, "but they also opened my eyes. This wasn't about HOA rules or property maintenance. This was about hate." Maria Santos testified via video link about how Rebecca and Marcus had destroyed her family's life. "We lost our home, my husband lost his job, our children had to change schools," Maria explained, "all because we didn't fit Rebecca's vision of what a community should look like." She described the exact same pattern of fake emails, false reports, and whisper campaigns. "They had it down to a science," Maria said. "The same tricks, the same threats designed to force families out of their communities." Mrs. Cooper provided testimony that showed Rebecca's racism wasn't hidden from longtime residents. "I've lived in Mountain View for 20 years, she told the court. "I watched Rebecca target every family that wasn't white. She told me it was necessary to preserve community character." Then Mrs. Cooper delivered a line that made several jury members visibly react. She said these people change property values and bring crime, but in 2 years since Amara moved in, we've had 0 crime, and my property value increased 15%. Marcus's testimony was the final nail in Rebecca's coffin. Wearing an orange jumpsuit and speaking as part of his plea agreement, he provided details about their systematic operation that were absolutely damning. Rebecca had spreadsheets tracking racial demographics, he explained. She researched each family before targeting them. This wasn't random, this was systematic. When asked about their financial motivations, Marcus revealed something that shocked everyone. "We made $78,000 over 4 years, but Rebecca spent $45,000 on operational costs. Profit wasn't the main goal." The most devastating part of Marcus's testimony came when he described Rebecca's true motivations. She told me, "Marcus, we're saving these communities from invasion. Property values, crime rate, school quality, everything depends on keeping the right kind of people here." You could hear people in the gallery gasp when Marcus repeated those words. The prosecution had successfully proven that this wasn't about money or community standards. It was about racial purity. Rebecca's defense attorney made the massive mistake of putting her on the witness stand, probably thinking jury sympathy might save her. But Rebecca couldn't control herself under cross-examination. When asked if she'd ever targeted white families for HOA violations, she responded, "That's different. They understand community standards." The prosecutor pressed, "What makes their understanding different?" Rebecca's answer sealed her fate. "They fit better with established residents. They don't change the character of the neighborhood." Then came Rebecca's complete meltdown moment. "These people come in and think they can change everything," she shouted at the jury. "Property values drop, crime increases, schools get worse. Someone had to protect what we built." The prosecutor asked the obvious follow-up question. "When you say these people, who exactly do you mean?" Rebecca's response removed any doubt about her motivations. "You know exactly who I mean. People who don't belong in mountain communities. People who should stay where they came from." The reaction in the courtroom was immediate and powerful. Jury members looked uncomfortable, some shaking their heads in disgust. Mrs. Cooper was crying in the gallery, and Maria Santos, who had flown in to attend the trial in person, put her hand over her mouth in shock. Amara didn't react emotionally to Rebecca's outburst. She just looked sad and said quietly, "There it is. The truth Rebecca tried to hide behind fake paperwork and legal language." In closing arguments, the prosecution delivered a line that still gives me chills. Rebecca's own words have convicted her. "This isn't about community standards. This is about hate. This is about a woman who appointed herself judge of who belongs in America." And the defense attorney made a weak attempt to salvage something, claiming Rebecca spoke out of frustration after months of character assassination. But everyone could see it was hopeless. Rebecca finally seemed to realize how badly her testimony had gone when her lawyer started whispering urgently in her ear. The jury deliberation took only 2 hours, surprisingly quick for such a complex case. When they returned with guilty verdicts on all counts, federal hate crime charges, fraud conspiracy, filing false reports, and multiple harassment charges, Rebecca's face went completely white. She genuinely believed that her charm and victim act would work with the jury. Now she was facing a potential 15 to 20 years in federal prison. After the verdict was read, the judge scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later and allowed for victim impact statements. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed around Amara, but she kept her statement brief and dignified. "Justice isn't just about punishment, it's about ensuring no other family has to endure what we did." As Rebecca was led away in handcuffs, she stared at Amara with pure hatred, no longer bothering to hide behind fake politeness. But even as Rebecca was being escorted out, her lawyer approached Amara with one final proposition. "My client wants to apologize and make amends. She's willing to provide information about other communities she worked in exchange for a lighter sentence." Amara's response was perfect. Some things are too late to apologize for. She made her choices. Rebecca still had secrets about other communities she'd targeted, but would those secrets be buried forever because Amara refused to show mercy? What would you do in Amara's situation? Comment on your choice, mercy or justice. Sometimes the hardest decisions reveal who we really are. Sentencing day arrived with even more national attention than the trial itself. The courthouse was packed with victims, community members, civil rights advocates, and media from across the country. Rebecca's case had become a symbol of fighting back against systematic racial harassment, and everyone wanted to see how justice would be served. Rebecca made one last pathetic attempt at sympathy by writing an apology letter that she read in court, but it sounded completely hollow and self-serving. "I never intended to hurt anyone," she claimed. "I was trying to protect something I valued." Judge Jennifer Morrison wasn't buying any of it. The victim impact statements were absolutely powerful. Maria Santos spoke about how her children still ask why they had to leave their home, and how impossible it is to explain that they were forced out because of their skin color. "Rebecca stole more than money," Maria said. "She stole our sense of belonging, Mrs." Cooper talked about staying silent too long because of fear, but how Amara had shown her that silence enables hatred. "Rebecca made our community ugly with fear and division," she explained. But Amara's statement was the one that brought tears to my eyes. "Your Honor," she said, "Rebecca didn't just target my family. She attacked the idea that America belongs to all of us. She tried to turn our neighborhood into a segregated enclave. But she failed, because love and justice are stronger than hate and fear." Then Amara delivered the line that made headlines across the country. "I don't ask for mercy for Rebecca. I ask for justice for every family still living in fear because someone decided they don't belong in their own community." Judge Morrison's sentencing was everything we could have hoped for. "This court has rarely seen such calculated, systematic racial harassment," she said. "The defendant used sophisticated methods to terrorize families based solely on their race and ethnicity." Rebecca received 18 years in federal prison, the maximum under the hate crime statute. She also had to pay $500,000 in restitution to all victims, was banned for life from serving on any community board, faced 3 years of probation with required diversity classes, and had to complete 1,000 hours of community service at immigrant assistance organizations. When the sentence was announced, Rebecca completely broke down. 18 years? I'm 52. My life is over, she screamed. But even facing that harsh reality, she still couldn't show genuine remorse. "I was protecting my community. I was protecting property values." This is political persecution. Judge Morrison's final words to Rebecca were perfect. "Ms. Rebecca, you had every opportunity to choose differently. You chose hate over understanding, fear over acceptance. Now you face the consequences of those choices." As Rebecca was led away screaming about the destruction of traditional communities, Amara simply nodded and said, "Goodbye, Rebecca. I hope prison gives you time to examine your heart." Marcus received 6 years in federal prison and had to pay $100,000 in restitution, but his cooperation with ongoing investigations of other communities meant his sentence was significantly lighter than Rebecca's. But the most satisfying part of Rebecca's downfall came from an unexpected source. 3 weeks after sentencing, we received a letter from the new HOA president of a community in Oregon, a real legitimate HOA this time. They'd seen news coverage of Rebecca's case and realized they'd been dealing with copycat behavior from someone in their own neighborhood. Rebecca's conviction had given other communities the courage to investigate their own suspicious neighborhood enforcers. Within 2 months, authorities had uncovered similar schemes in 4 different states. Rebecca hadn't just been running a local scam. She'd inspired an entire network of wannabe community controllers, and now they were all falling like dominoes. 6 months after the sentencing, Mountain View had transformed into something beautiful. 5 new families of various backgrounds had moved in, including a Vietnamese family where the father was a pediatrician, an interracial couple with a teacher and engineer, a black military veteran family with twins, and a Mexican-American family who opened a restaurant that became everyone's favorite gathering place. Property values increased by 20% due to increased demand for what people were calling a welcoming community. A year later, Amara and I were hosting a community barbecue in our backyard with dozens of neighbors' children, playing multiple languages being spoken, and pure harmony everywhere you looked. Remember when Rebecca said property values would drop? I asked Amara while we watched kids of all colors playing together. She laughed and said, "Yeah, well, turns out diversity is actually good for business. Who knew?" The irony was absolutely perfect. The most touching moment came when a young black family with a toddler moved in down the street. The father looked nervous about community acceptance, clearly worried about potential problems. Amara walked over to introduce herself and said, "Hi, welcome to Mountain View. This is a safe place for everyone now." Mrs. Cooper appeared immediately with fresh cookies, and I could see the relief on the new father's face as he realized he'd moved into a genuinely welcoming community. So, that's how a woman named Rebecca came screaming to raid our cabin and ended up frozen when my wife handed her a warrant. But it turns out the warrant was just the beginning of a much larger story about what happens when hatred meets someone who refuses to back down. Rebecca thought she could use fear to control who belonged in our community, but she was wrong. Communities aren't about keeping people out. They're about making everyone feel at home. Mountain View is now more diverse, more welcoming, and more valuable than ever. Property values are up, crime is down, and Rebecca, well, she's got 15 more years to think about her choices in federal prison. Amara didn't just win against one racist fraudster. She proved that when good people stand up and fight back, hate doesn't stand a chance against truth and justice. The final update on Rebecca came through news reports. She's currently serving her sentence in federal prison in Washington state, with 15 years remaining. She's filed multiple appeals, all of which have been denied, and she refuses to participate in the required diversity education programs. Marcus was released after 4 years and now works with immigrant assistance organizations, apparently having learned from his mistakes in a way Rebecca never could. But in a world where hatred still lurks in the shadows, how many more Rebeccas are out there waiting for their moment to terrorize innocent families? And how many more Amaras are ready to stand up and say, "Not in my community," when that hatred comes knocking? BD Stories believes every voice matters. Share in the comments. What would you do if hatred knocked on your door? Because sometimes one person's courage can change everything. The lesson here. Sometimes the most powerful weapon against hate isn't anger or violence. It's preparation, documentation, and standing up for what's right. Rebecca thought she could use fear to control who belonged in our community, but she was wrong. When good people unite and fight back with truth and evidence, hate doesn't stand a chance. Here at BD Stories, we believe that every voice matters, and every story of standing up to injustice deserves to be heard. If this story showed you that justice can prevail, hit that like button to let us know. And remember, whether it's a fake HOA Karen or any other kind of bully, you have more power than you think when you refuse to back down.